Hello and welcome to Contra Mundum. My name is Susannah Eileen Martin and I am your host. Today with me I have my friend Abby Chennels. Would you like to sort of tell the audience what you do?
Well, my name's Abby and I'm a student, but I'm a student in the Global Studies program at Liberty University, which means that I travel a lot. And I just got back from a 4-month stint in Mexico.
Yeah, so Abby was gone the entire semester away from us poor people and stuck in Mexico. So that was interesting. So as you guys know, the point of the show is that everyone is an expert in something, and right now Abby is a little bit of an expert in Mexico. So the first thing I want to know is what sort of got you into wanting to travel the world?
Well, up until I was 15, I had never left the country before in my entire life. But when I was 15, I had the chance to travel to Haiti, and it was my first time out of the country, and it was also pretty soon after the really big earthquake that kind of devastated Haiti and was world news for a while. So when I went, Haiti's already one of the poorest countries in the world, but after experiencing an earthquake of the magnitude that they experienced, it was even worse, and there were tent cities everywhere, and people were living in extreme poverty. And on that trip, I realized that the bubble that I'd been living in my whole life was not the whole world. And I guess, got the bug at that point to go see what else was out there and see what I could learn from other cultures and see what I could do to help the people that were struggling and see what I could learn from them to influence my own life.
Cool. So how many countries have you been into at this point?
Well, I have been to Haiti twice. I went to Bosnia once. I've been to Mexico 3 times, and I've been to Canada 3 times as well.
So what's the longest stint? Was it the 4 months?
4 months is the longest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So tell us a little bit more. What did you do when you were in Mexico?
Well, I was teaching a lot of English. I taught 8 to 10 English classes a week.
That's quite a lot.
It was a lot. And to be honest, I don't love teaching English. So that was a little bit of a stretch sometimes, but it was really good because teaching English is a way to build relationships with people. I also, I was teaching 8 to 10 English classes a week from varying levels. I guess it was 5 classes per week were in schools. So elementary age kids and preschool age kids. That was interesting. And then we taught some classes in our home, so just community members, and we had another class that was also just community members, so those ones were kind of varying age levels.
And you got class credit for this kind of stuff, right?
I did. It wasn't for the teaching part. I was taking 15 credit hours, technically still as a residential student, but the format of the classes is online. And so I was doing things like I had an ethnographic research project, which was probably my favorite assignment of the semester.
Can you tell a little bit more about that?
Sure. So ethnography is, it's kind of a hands-on format of research where you're not in a lab or that type of research, but what you're doing is you're out amongst the people asking questions and gathering your own information about whatever your topic is.
So you're kind of like a journalist.
Yeah, a little bit. And then compiling that into research. It's kind of like what, you think of the anthropologists that wrote all the famous works and things. That's basically what they were doing, was ethnography. So we had to do a project for that. And then I had to write weekly journals and keep track of my schedule. And I had to have language hours where I was focusing on learning Spanish and things like that. So that was what I got credit for.
So are you fluent in Spanish?
I am not fluent in Spanish, but I am more fluent than I used to be.
How did you teach English if you weren't fluent in Spanish?
Well, that was a struggle at first because you can't explain grammatical concepts in English. They're not going to, especially to elementary age kids and preschoolers, especially the preschoolers. I taught almost exclusively in Spanish, and that was one of the things that really grew my language the most because I spent the first couple weeks Google translating everything that I needed to explain games, grammatical concepts, all of the words I was teaching, But it got to the point where when you're doing that, you just learn the phrases that you need to know every day and you use them. So
yeah, I had a professor at one point. Actually, this might have been a teacher in high school that was an American that married a German, and she was my German teacher. And she went overseas and was hanging out with his family. And for the first couple of months that they hung out with them, she didn't realize that a single one of them spoke English until suddenly her mother-in-law came up to her and said, "Oh, your German getting very good." And she's like, "You've got to be kidding me."
That's the best way to learn, but it can be a humiliating process at times for sure.
Have you ever mistakenly said something and meant something else that's really funny?
I wish I had a really funny story about that. I really don't have very many hilarious mistakes I've made. Mine have mostly just been stupid. A lot of times I would say something and then all of the kids in the class would start repeating whatever I had said and laughing. And that's when I knew I had said, I don't know. I don't even know what I said half those times. I just didn't say it again. But I can't think of any really funny times when I messed up the language.
Okay. Moving on to a little more somber note here. Can you tell us sort of what conditions the people that were in the countries that you've visited have been living in?
Well, in Haiti, there was definitely extreme poverty, and that really impacted me as someone who has lived in comfort my whole life. I've never been hungry or thirsty. Not, of course I have, but not in the sense of I was hungry and there was nothing for me to eat, you know?
Usually when an American says, "I'm hungry," and there's nothing to eat, it means there's a fridge full of stuff that you just don't want to eat.
Exactly. And so I had never seen the reality of that situation. I'm hungry and there is literally nothing to eat. So that was really impactful for me. In the other countries I've been to, it's been less that way. Bosnia is definitely a very European country, and while the unemployment rate was incredibly high in the town where I was, and we did do some food distribution, everyone had shelter, you know, and everyone at least had a little bit of food. So it wasn't, I've never seen anything quite to the level that I've seen in Haiti anywhere else. And in Mexico, it is technically a third world country, but for the most part, while it may seem a little backward at times to us, especially in rural areas, they are still very developed, I would say, especially in the cities.
Well, I think some rural areas in the U.S. seem a little backward to some people.
Coming from one of those rural areas, I can say yes, that is true.
Yeah. So what do you think is your favorite thing about traveling the world?
The food.
I know you've been telling us the wonders of cheap avocados for months.
Because they're fantastic. Food prices in the U.S. are ridiculous.
Yeah, so you said that you could buy like a whole bushel of avocados for the price of like one avocado in the U.S.
Yep, that's a true statement. That's pretty much all produce. I could go and spend like $2 and get produce for the whole week in Mexico, whereas that buys me like one avocado or like
that
one bunch of bananas.
Yeah, that is crazy. Did you have to use pesos when you were down there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Did you have like a favorite, and this is a bad question for a teacher, but did you have like a favorite kid or someone that you could just see grow a lot?
Yeah, I had some great characters especially in my elementary
tell us a
school
little
classes.
bit about them so we can get to know them.
So one of the classes,
you don't
probably
have to use their names.
Well, first names are fine. They all have
Okay.
like 12 names anyway, so you'd
That-
never be
is that
able
a
to
thing in
identify which
Mexico?
kid it is. So I had one class that I taught twice a week, pretty much the whole time I was there. And so I ended up getting to know those kids pretty well. It was in a very small rural school that was, the teachers aren't actually fully licensed teachers. They're like teachers in training. So the education level isn't super high. And so that was interesting in and of itself, but also it was very small. And so I had kids ranging from first grade to sixth grade all in one classroom for my English class. And there were, I think, 29 of them. So that was an interesting dynamic just in general of trying to tailor lessons to fit the older kids and the little kids both.
Kind of like an old school schoolhouse.
Right, exactly. And so just early on, I could tell which kids were really going to be on board with learning English throughout the semester, but I also had some kids that really surprised me. And so, especially the boys, because you just never know with little boys.
No, you never know.
You just really never
I
know.
worked with kids enough to know.
They're crazy. So when I first got there, the first 2 weeks were pretty rough because my Spanish was pretty rough and the kids were like, who is crazy little white girl that's coming to teach us English. So there were a couple kids in particular that gave me just a lot of trouble the first 2 weeks. They were just making noises during class and like running around
like
and
trying to figure out where you are.
Right. They wanted to feel me
Testing
out,
you.
you know, what am I going to do about this? So in particular, there were 2 kids, Sebastian and Hector, and they, oh my goodness, they were so ornery. They still are ornery. They continued to be ornery the whole semester, but specifically just knowing that they were intelligent and that they could do English, I started asking them questions and giving them more responsibilities in class. And I just watched them bloom into these kids that were ready to give answers. Yes, they were still ornery. One time I had to take away Hector's chair because he wouldn't stop standing on it. He would just stand on it in the corner because he just wanted to stand on it and see what I would do about it. You know, but at the same time, he would know the answer to the question I was asking. And so that was really encouraging to watch them grow. I also had a kid named Julian, and he was not, I mean, he's ornery because he's a boy, but he wasn't in the same way that Sebastian and Hector were. He was ready to go from the beginning, and he would come sit next to me during their recess and just talk to me. At the beginning, I don't even know what he was talking about because my Spanish was struggling, but toward the end, he just talked to me about whatever was on his little heart. And that was just a blessing, getting to know the kids and hear their lives and watch them grow. And one of my hopes is that English for one semester is not a lot, but English is something that's really important for academic advancement in Mexico. And so I'm hoping that maybe that gave some of those kids the jump start that they needed because their level of education is so low, to seek out more opportunities in the future to be able to advance, because there are some really bright kids that could go really far.
Yeah. So what's like the average job? What do people do in the town that you were in? And where were you?
The town is called Amialco, and it's a really small town. It's about an hour from a bigger city.
Okay.
So there is that proximity if you need something in the bigger city, but a lot of the people don't travel that far. Some people don't have cars, you know. So it's kind of its own little self-contained world as well.
Okay, so what do people do around there? What's the usual occupation?
One thing that's really interesting about Mexico is that if people don't have a job, they will often create a job for themselves and do whatever to try and make money. One thing that really interested me about Amialco is that there seemed like there were like 100 mechanic places. And
Really?
it's really not that big of a town.
Are there that many cars?
They were all busy all the time. I don't understand how it happened. Everybody must just break down every day. I don't know how it works, but they were always busy, and there were a million of them, and it made me laugh. I don't really know how that
That's
functioned.
Really, it's like Starbucks in America. There's one on every corner.
Right, or like pharmacies. I don't understand. But somehow they made it work, and I would say that was probably the thing I saw the most, but there are just a ton of small businesses, little fruterias where you can buy produce, and then there's a couple grocery stores, taco stands.
You've also been singing the praises of tacos for a while.
Because they're delicious.
So how do American tacos and Mexican tacos differ?
Well, if by American taco you mean the thing in like the flour tortilla with like beans and meat and lettuce, Mexican tacos are almost 100% of the time on corn tortillas. So that's one difference. I think corn tortillas are delicious. If you don't like corn tortillas, it's probably because you've only had ones in the U.S., which are gross. A fresh corn tortilla straight off the machine, hot. Oh my goodness, it's delicious. But so oftentimes it'll be a corn tortilla with some kind of meat, maybe a little bit of onions and cilantro, and then you can add your own salsa, whatever. There's usually cups of different kinds of salsa on the tables at a taco stand or even in people's houses, and then you can kind of flavor it to your own taste.
Cool. That's really interesting.
Sometimes they come with cheese also.
Cheese is good. I am a huge fan of cheese.
Cheese is delicious.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to sort of, any misconceptions about Mexico you want to change for Americans?
Without getting into politics, I don't know that there's a whole lot I have to say. And, you know, I'm not going to pretend to be more informed than I am on that point. I would just say that I wish that that we could find a way to all be friends, you know, because
why can't we?
Exactly. My hosts that I was staying with often said that there are not two countries in the world that are next door to each other, like Mexico and the U.S., that are so different culturally. And I would say that that's true. Yeah. And I would say that that's probably contributed to a lot of the conflict between the countries. But both countries have really beautiful things about their cultures. And I think that's one thing I've learned to appreciate in traveling is that every culture has something really beautiful about it, or lots of something's really beautiful. And every culture also has a lot of really broken things about it. And so just learning to evaluate those and not focus on the broken aspects of one culture without looking at the beautiful side of it as well, I think that would go a long way in helping everyone get along, but especially next door neighbor countries.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Did you come across any sort of odd cultural things while you were over there? Or in any of the countries you visited?
Well, you know, in every country, there's something that seems odd to me because
odd as an American.
Right. You know, in Bosnia, there was a superstition that if you sat on the ground as a woman, you would become infertile. So we couldn't sit on the ground in Bosnia. That was a struggle. I sit on the floor all the time, on the ground, on everything. I know. So that's not allowed. In Mexico, I'm trying to think some of the things that have been hard for me to readjust. I've only been back in the States for a week and 2 days now. Yeah. So I'm still struggling to remember to flush my toilet paper, because in Mexico you throw it away because their septic system isn't good enough to filter it out. I also am struggling to drink tap water. I filled up my water bottle from my best friend's sink this morning, and it was so weird. Every time I take a drink, I feel like I'm going to get a parasite and die, because you can't drink the tap water in Mexico.
They do like well water or something?
Bottled water.
Bottled water.
Everything's bottled.
Oh, okay. It's going to be kind of expensive.
Yeah. I mean, it's not... Everything's, as far as food-wise, is typically cheaper in Mexico, so it's not too bad. And then also, Mexicans are very careful about being discreet with money. And so I had my toll money out on my steering wheel when I was driving yesterday, and I was like, oh, this is so awkward. I feel so uncomfortable. Everybody's going to think I'm rich. And then I'm like, it's $2. That's not how this works here. So they've been interesting. I think it's easier to notice them when I'm readjusting and realizing, oh, I've been doing it this way for 4 months, and now I'm back to my home culture and figuring out how that works again.
Yeah, I remember I spent 2 weeks on a big sailboat in the Gulf of Maine for a while. And when you're on a ship, there are certain things that are different than when you're on land.
Sure.
And one of the things that's different is they call the bathroom the head. And for like a month after I got back from sailing for 2 weeks, I called the bathroom the head.
That's awesome.
Because that was just what I'd gotten used to saying for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It was kind of a funny little thing that happened. But so how's not speaking Spanish all the time?
Well, I can kind of feel myself losing my Spanish, which is discouraging and sad, but I still, especially when I'm in public, when I say like excuse me or sorry or thank you to people, I have to catch myself and make sure I'm saying it in English, because those were all the little things that I said in Spanish all the time, you know? Yeah. But I think I'm doing okay with it. I don't know. You'd have to ask my family. They're the ones who have to live with me. And
yeah, I know in writing is one of the funny things. I'm better writing German than I am speaking it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's different is there are certain German words which are the same in English and German, but in German they're capitalized because they capitalize all their nouns for reasons. I don't know. But so in particular the word idea, every time I Every time I write the word idea, I write it capitalized because I was so used to saying it. I was so used to writing it in German as often as I could. So
sure.
Every time I write it, it's capitalized. And I'm like, I'm not writing in German. I'm writing in English. The weirdest thing about learning the new language was when I started dreaming in German.
Yes.
That was odd.
That is
do you do
odd.
that?
I do that. It's a very strange experience. I never dream exclusively in Spanish, but I often dream partially in Spanish.
It's like, I have to wonder, it's like, I don't even know enough German to make sense of this. This doesn't make any sense. How am I able to dream in German when I'm like, I speak such broken German?
Uh-huh. I'm pretty sure all the people in my dream speak worse Spanish than they would in real life because my brain doesn't have it all together.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, so we're about run out of time, and I know you want to get on to do other stuff today, so you're a busy girl back from Mexico and such. I'm sure there's lots of people who want to see you. So thank you
Quite.
so much for coming in, and I'd like to have you back sometime. That would be a lot of fun.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. And to all of my people listening at home, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.